Welcome to Commerce Media Matters, your go-to podcast for unpacking the world of commerce media. Here, we catch up with industry leaders on news, research, insights, perspectives, and everything in between.
Hi, I'm Paul, Chief Growth Officer at Voodoo.
And I'm Nick, founder and CEO at Voodoo. And today we've got someone who's been documenting and shaping this space for years, Colin Lewis. He almost needs no introduction, does he, Paul?
No, he doesn't. Colin's the co-founder of Retail Media Works, editor-in-chief for retail media at Internet Retailing, and a regular columnist for Marketing Week. He's written in-depth best practice reports covering everything from digital marketing to innovation. And if you picked up one, you'll know this guy does not mess around.
He's spoken everywhere, from London to Milan to Sydney and Santiago. And he's known for putting memorable labels on his take about the industry, like Fab Four silos and TikTokification of retail media.
So, yep, we've got a big one today. Welcome, Colin. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. And thank you for calling me a big one. That's not something that's used every day in my life.
We're off to a great start. So, Colin, your name's already been floating around our podcast. We actually had Kiri Masters on just previously, and naturally your name came up, particularly because I was witness to your amazing debate in Cannes this year, which I thought was one of the best events of the whole thing. There was a lot of banter flying around in that pub. Did you enjoy that session?
Well, the slight problem is I came up with the idea in the first place, which was like, I had this idea noodling in my head, like, let's do a thing in Cannes, let's have a debate. Let's call it the celebrity death match, which is kind of showing my age because I remember the whole MTV thing. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And of course, my fellow Australian, Kiri, then proceeded to slaughter me on the stage. And, it was a bad idea from my personal sort of like ego perspective, but a great idea for the audience.
Well, I thought you did a fantastic job. It was clear that you were playing the black hat a couple of times, but the banter was good and it was very entertaining. It wasn't that sort of normal boring thing. And you covered some really good stuff. Like we spoke about where's the creativity in retail media for the advertiser. We spoke about return on an investment. Some big themes. Any comments on any of those?
Well, one thing I would say is in general, a lot of retail media stuff is kind of boring, and it doesn't need to be boring. You can still talk about these interesting topics and not be boring. And panels are the worst offender, where everybody has to agree and say, "Oh, Nick and Paul, you're so right." And let me just follow. Forget that. That doesn't help people in terms of learning and understanding. It actually doesn't move anything along. So, so the one thing you touched on there, Paul, which is creativity. And what I mean when I say talking about creativity, I don't mean, hey, did an amazing ad and it won an award in Cannes. That's not what I'm referring to at all. But unfortunately, the word creativity is kind of trapped into that, if you will, and kind of regarded as a thing for the special ones, if you will. And I'm not referring to that at all. What I'm referring to when I talk about creativity in retail media is creativity in terms of an approach, creativity in terms of thinking through how you could structure and hire for your retail media network, creativity in terms of your propositions in your market, but also creativity in terms of the actual sort of communications, the advertisements that you're using. And that whole world has actually been addressed elsewhere through a lot of work actually that came from Australia around marketing effectiveness and creativity effectiveness. And my sort of entreaty to retail media in the world is to say, let's go bring some of this other good stuff that people have learned and apply it to it rather than just kind of cut and paste. Part of the reason I say this is, as a sinner in this department as well, used to take my Facebook advertisements and all my other digital print ads and try and make them work in digital display. And of course, they didn't work. So my final point is retail media is an entity of its own. It's its own language. It's its own channel. It's its own thing. So I encourage everybody here listening to go and think about the world of retail media through the lens of creativity in an execution sense.
What you're saying, Colin, if I understand this correctly, is there's a lacking of creativity across the whole retail media ecosystem.
Well, I wouldn't be so crass as to go and say that everybody is lacking in creativity. What I will say is that I've seen innovation everywhere, and literally innovation everywhere. So I've got two themes in what I talk about with people. Is like innovation can come from anywhere, and please apply creativity. But I also like to apply creativity in terms of being an open-minded person, which leads me back to my first point, which is innovation. So when I talk about some of the amazing things I've seen around the world, let me give you an example. I've just come earlier in May, before I went to Cannes. I went to Belgrade in Serbia, and I saw the most innovative indoor and outdoor screens applicable in a retail media business that I've seen in the world. And last year, same thing. Saw some incredible stuff in Chile, in Santiago. But we tend to look to the US, and I'm like, no, innovation everywhere, creativity everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Paul and I have discussed how impressed we are when we see a level of creativity come into the screens for an indoor and outdoor, and we've seen a lot of that recently. I couldn't agree with you more. I don't want to be the panel guy where we're agreeing all the time. I know you like being pushed. I'll give it a whirl. I think, as I said, you have to bring in some different thinking, so you're not just putting a dollar discount ad on top of a screen. You've got the opportunity for a moving image, and you've got an audience, and you've got an environment. There's so much that you can do there, right?
Well, the way I put it is, I don't think people have worked out that it's a different context and it's a different channel in the store. The conversations I'm hearing is it's just digital out of home applied. So it's kind of like, coming from one kind of part of the industry, which is looking at the world through the lens of JC Deco or Clear Channel. And I'm like, no, this is a new thing. It's a new vernacular, if you will. And the part of the problem, and I'm going to start kind of lobbing sort of grenades, if you will, here, is that marketing and brand teams are snobbish about retail media. They think it's a performance-based media, and they've been kind of brainwashed into thinking that the only thing that matters is broad reach and 30-second TV commercials and maybe outdoor. And anything that is in-store is, if you will, below the line. And there's a little bit of snobbishness and stroke sort of hierarchy incentives in there as well, which is like, well, why would I get myself involved in fumbling in the greasy till, as Yeats says in his poem, because that would be a different team. But in fact, retail media is its own language, and screens are its own language. And I'd say the stuff that is going to happen for in-store screens is going to be as good as anything we see in Cannes for outdoor. It's just people haven't recognized that. They don't have the language in their head for that.
I reckon it's bang on. I reckon you're spot on there. I want to get into some of your lengthy pieces of work. Now, you've spent a decade writing for Marketing Week, while also serving as the editor-in-chief of retail media at Internet Retailing and producing in-depth best practice reports, which are highly regarded. From that vantage point, how has the conversation around digital commerce and retail media evolved over the past decade? And what's the single biggest misconception brands still have about retail media? Is it what you just described then? Is that the biggest?
Very interesting question. And it's sort of like a pre and post thing. So one of the things that I say to people, there's kind of 3 layers to building a career. One is doing the job. And the second aspect of building a career is ideally you get to teach the thing that you do in the job. And the third layer to a career that makes you really, really good is actually writing about the thing you do, because the teaching and writing are kind of 2 separate things to the doing of the job. Now, I've been very lucky. I've been lecturing in marketing related topics such as strategy, such as e-commerce, such as digital marketing since 2011, created numerous courses on that topic. But then I've been writing for Marketing Week, but also been writing as editor-in-chief, which sounds very grand. Essentially, I'm writing the retail media stuff for the guys in internet retailing, because you have to sit in front of the screen and sort of start crying and get the content written. And what you start noticing is a pattern. And what I noticed, there was once a pattern which was up as far as the pandemic. And up as far as the pandemic, most FMCG CPG brands were like, e-commerce is not relevant to me. And how do I know? Because I'm the person doing the lectures, where I'm doing a lecture on strategy, I'm doing a lecture on e-commerce, and doing a lecture on digital marketing. And the folks who are amongst the biggest brand names in the world come up to me and say, apps. And you're kind of like, okay, how do I answer this? People from major big alcohol brand names saying to me, e-commerce is not relevant to our business. Then we hit, and also, by the way, when I talked about Amazon, it was the same story. Then we hit the pandemic, and people kind of got religion, if you will. And around 2020, 21, 22, you could see, maybe my previous religion is changed, and now I've got a new religion. And the new religion is what we'll call in the widest context digital commerce. Now, what I'm finding still is that there's still old school, new school, where there was people like me and various others going, hey, pay attention to this digital commerce thing. It's kind of interesting. You can still be an amazing marketer and apply these new rules to your business. And actually, everyone's a winner, baby, as the Hot Chocolate song says. However, there was also the denialists, which is this thing will never take off. This thing will never happen.
Yep.
And we are now at this thing will never happen, this thing will never take off moment again. So we had sort of like 4 moments of this. If you take, say, up as far as, give or take, 2012, this online thing will never take off. Google's not relevant to my business. Social media comes out. Social media advertising happens. Social media is not relevant to my business. We hit to sort of like late 20s, if you will. Digital commerce not relevant to my business. Oh, it now is relevant to my business. And now here we are, 2025, and everybody's like, oh no, we're all over digital marketing, we're all over social, we're all over this. Where are people saying it's not relevant to my business? They're saying artificial intelligence, LLMs, and TikTok. Now, TikTok is a metaphor. So I don't want people to think about people dancing. Yeah, it's a metaphor. These things aren't relevant to my business. And we're on the pivot right now over the next while. We start throwing away the old beliefs and moving on to a new set of beliefs.
I think we have to, right? Because the traditional models of search, which you said, everyone's realized how important, that is in their business. It's been disruptive. My kids, they talk about searching it up. They don't talk about Googling. And when they say search it up, they're going on to TikTok to search. We're looking at the growth and explosion of GPTs and the amount of product searching and information that's done on there. How does that change the commerce media landscape with, we'll jump straight into it, the big one, AI. Where do you see that going? Are retail media networks embracing AI yet? I know that Walmart's talking about Sparky, I think, which is their AI tool. But have you seen many retailers jump into this space?
Well, that's with a lot of situations, like the early adopters are the people with the resources to go and do it. So I've seen the resources applied in what I call a creative and production context. And I've also seen, back to my theme about innovation everywhere, I've seen companies in Eastern Europe using AI to create live, on-the-fly market segmentation based on live data to create propensity models, prescriptive models, insight models, literally on the fly with the latest data coming in online and offline, as in still data and online data. So there's lots of pockets of stuff happening, but it's coming from, as with a lot of things, coming from newer businesses who don't have legacy thinking or those with lots of resources. Now, how do we split all this up? It is very much like how we kind of that split between, particularly say when Google came out and Facebook came out with their models, which was at the start, there was a lot of inverted commas hacks you could use and you were able to take advantage of them. And then those hacks disappeared. There was a lot of stuff, apps in particular around Facebook advertising around the time in Facebook and social media that disappeared when Mark Zuckerberg strangled the algorithm at that time. And so all that stuff didn't work. So we're kind of in that zone at the moment whereby we've got to understand AEO and GEO. We got to be able to set up tools for the LLMs to recognize content and make it appear. And we also got to actually make it findable as well. And these two things are very tricky. They're like SEO, but they're not quite like SEO. For instance, to be found by an LLM, it kind of likes where the citations. So you kind of got to write your content where the citations. If you take, say, the comparison with SEO and AEO, getting it right for algorithms, getting it right for these models, again, it's a different way of thinking. And there's very few people with that skills because the skills are barely even brand new. We're like it's 2006 and somebody's just told you about Google AdWords, or it's 2012, somebody told you about Facebook advertising. It's right for a while and then it's not right. But what I would suggest to people is that there are some interesting ways to think about it and trial them and see, can you get listed? Can you get your products listed? That's with the retailer. Sorry, I should switch over to the brand side as well. Because one of the things I say to the brands is, you've got to do the brilliant basics. And the brilliant basics are having great landing page, great product page with lots of content that's convertible and so on. Well, what's the new PDP? What's the new brilliant basics? The new brilliant basics are understanding SEO. Understanding AEO and GEO. But it may only work for a while, whereas the rules of SEO are kind of known now for a good while, minus the Google updates. So we're in a very early phase. The second kind of thing, the kind of like, I wouldn't say counterpoint, but the kind of related point to that is, where does this fit in the world of advertising creative? And I don't mean creative as in I'm being creative. I mean as in the actual artifacts that we are putting through various channels and through various pieces of content. And that production line, instead of being dependent on, Paul and Colin getting in front of their laptop and cranking it out, that can be kind of done exponentially and A/B tested on the fly the whole time. So you're like, our scarcity mentality is kind of gone, and now we can do everything. You can call it personalization, you can call it scale, you can call it personalization scale, whatever you want. But that's a world we're not ready for.
No.
We might just jump back a bit, just take another step back. With your work with Retail Media Works, and you're an advisor at Grace & Co., you've helped many retail media networks scale. You spoke about the big guys. They've got the resources to do it, but there's so many of these guys now jumping into this space. What's a great piece of advice you'd give them?
So the way we see the world is through, are you in startup phase? Are you in scale-up phase? Now, typically, scale-up phase is 2 to 3 years into the journey. You've had a couple of wins on the adoption curve. You're at the first kind of like 2 sections of the standard sort of a model of adoption. Then you've got these wins, and then chief exec says, how do we scale? Now, with startup, you're more like a sort of, where can we get some quick wins in the board? What ad tech are we going to offer, and so on. Typically what happens is, I'd like to say, let me reverse that statement. What happens is people come to us and say, hey, how do we monetize our data? Always the wrong question. And the second question is, what ad tech do we buy? And those two are the wrong questions. They're like a tell, like in poker, they're a tell that the person hasn't really understood what they're kind of trying to do. And in fact, when we work with retailers, it typically takes a year to get to where they want to go. And they come to us after the year and they say, oh, I see what you were talking about there.
Yeah.
So it's a multiple set of questions. So first of all, you're no longer in the retail business, you're in a media business. So you've got to see the world through that lens of media business. Therefore, you've got to get C-level buy-in. And your C-level folks typically think are retailers, and they don't understand media. So you're going to have an ongoing battle. The second thing is, you've got to understand that trade marketing is where a lot of retailers, or it can also be called co-op, a lot of where retailers make their money. And therefore, retail media is seen as a threat. Thirdly, many retailers outside of the US, and I'm including Australia, New Zealand, Europe, they don't earn a lot of their turnover from online. Yet all the case studies out there are about how I can do sponsored product, sponsored search. So what's your model? So in that context there, on retail media is obviously on-site, off-site, in-store. You might want to start with an in-store project. But then you go and have the second order effect. If you say, I'm doing it in-store, then you got to get ops involved, store management involved, and it's a whole different game to saying, I've got a website, I can do cool stuff on the website, I don't have to go tell everybody else. So first of all, it's like, what's your ambition? Do you see this as a thing for a quick money grab? Again, like my point a minute ago, if you see it as a quick money grab, you're going to fail. Yeah. If you say it as data monetization, you're not going to do as well. You have to see it as a brand new business where I'm going into the media business, where I have an underpinning of amazing data that I can then use to create on-site, off-site, in-store, and then I have technology to power that. Then I build relationships with brands through my trade team, and then I build relationship with agencies once I've got the trade team, so my existing brands up and running. But I've got to hire new skills. And one of the things that there's initial resistance on is, why would I need to hire a media salesperson? Well, because we're in the media business. And I've run media salespeople, and I'm no expert, but I know a media person when I meet them, and they are very different to trade people, and they're very different to marketing people. Yeah. They're a different breed. And so that's the key. So it's not about ad tech. It's not about monetizing data. It's about, what's our strategy? What's our ambition? We're in the media business. What are the assets that we can play with? And then how do we roll that out?
Yeah, great advice. Can I just ask you, from your experience, could be a loaded question, but what do you think percentage-wise of early startup, as you're saying, retail media networks, practitioners, they're entering this space, what percentage of them understand that from the start?
Very low. They know there's something missing. And obviously I'm there's a selection bias here, which is if they come to me, they realize that there's something missing. So in other words, they wouldn't have got in touch. So many retailers, obviously don't know what they don't know. And there's a little bit of selection bias coming from me because, I'm dealing with people who reached out to me. But in principle, the real question is there's so much noise out there to get mixed up. They've also got a lot of noise internally, and I kind of have to manage that as well. And so they kind of don't realize that they're getting into a brand new game. And part of that game is the change management aspect. I touched on screens a second ago. You want to roll out a screens network selling advertising, you got to be ready because it's an operational thing, but also your trade marketing folks will be giving some of that content away. And how do you sell it? We're talking about on-site. Well, how are you going to win over the e-commerce folks? So you're actually not in the marketing business if you're the marketing director running the retail media business or the commercial director trying to run it or sales director. You're in the change management business and you're in the persuasion business. And then you realize I'm in the media business. So it's a new game. And that's one of the things, it's kind of obvious to you, but actually I realize over the last while, I haven't kind of nailed that down. Well, a lot of people, they don't realize it's a new game, no different to when digital commerce was all out. That was a new game, but we thought it was going to cannibalize their existing business.
Because there's a familiarity with it, isn't there? That what they've done traditionally with trade, and the difference is when you jump to these, when you go between endemic and non-endemic brands, the brand becomes the client. And that's, I guess, something that retailers aren't used to the same way as a media salesperson is.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. I've tried to come up with various lines for my themed keynotes over the years. And one in 2022 was who's buying lunch. And so obviously retailers are used to the brand suppliers literally buying them lunch. In fact, it's so bad that I heard from a couple of retailers that they don't have a code line in their SAP system, their financial system, for expenses.
To do the reverse.
Yeah, it's not possible.
Yeah, right.
They can't do it. Yeah. But if you're obviously in the retail media business, and so what happens is, and by the way, I've been in these discussions where the commercial director or the chief exec or the CCO is going, hold on a second, Nick, why are you buying people lunch for? That's not how it works. And you're like, so there's still that mindset. In fact, one of my 2025 clients has very specifically said to me, the senior management don't understand retail media. And this business has been doing retail media for a while.
Yeah. When you cite examples like that, which I think is really fascinating about buying lunch, it's a cultural shift. It's not just an operational or a philosophy or strategy. It's a cultural shift that business has to be prepared to serve who they haven't served before. And that's a big change, right? I would think some struggle with that.
Well, I don't blame anybody with that. And the reason I say that is that retailers do something amazing. So they are incredible logistics business that enable us to buy at one price and sell at another. And, it's one of the oldest businesses in the world. You can see pictures on the wall in Herculaneum of people buying and selling, products for sale in bars, products for sale in retailers. So that's the game. And as I say, retail is detail. The retail is got its own specific skills, and that's why people tend to stay in retail their whole lives, because it's a fascinating business, and it's a business I've been involved in for a third of my career, so I love it to death. But if you want to weld any new business, and in this case it's retailing, but if you want to weld a new business onto an existing business, the host will reject it. Not because they're bad people, because they don't understand it, because it's a media business. And so this is kind of one of the key things. Now, I have a thesis that not everybody agrees with, but I have a strong belief that, it's not just me, but voluntarily people say this to me around the world, which is that the world of trade marketing or cooperative marketing will go the way of the dodo. And everything will be folded into retail media. And why is that? If I'm a brand supplier and I'm Paul and I work in, major big co around the world and I'm the CFO, and I look at this line item and I go to my CMO, Nick, and I say, Nick, I see this line item that I'm giving 100 million in this thing called co-op to my retailer in, X country, let's say Australia. Mm-hmm. But I'm also giving this other number here called retail media, and that's going up through the roof. So now the percentage of my total revenue I'm giving to this retailer has gone from 14 to 17% in 3 years. Do you know that's making us lose money? What do I get? Information do I get from my trade marketing? And what do I get from my retail media?
That's right.
Well, it turns out trade marketing, for the most part, says no data, no nothing. It's a version of key money, or hello money as it is called in my home country, Ireland. And it just goes to the bottom line. Now, that's fine. I'm not casting, arrows at this particular thing. But if you're a very big brand, you're a L'Oreal, you're a Unilever, you're a Coty, you're a Procter & Gamble, you're going to have these big negotiations and you're going to say, buddy, why am I giving you 17% and 3 years ago I was giving you 14%? How about this? You need to show me ROAS, ROI, incrementality. Everyone's a winner, baby.
You got to show the incrementality, don't you?
Yeah, Colin, you've spoken previously about the Fab Four silos: brand marketing, trade marketing, shopper marketing, and digital marketing, and how often they work in isolation. What is the real cost of that fragmentation?
There's a very good reason for everybody operating in this sort of fragmented world, because we need specialist skills, and digital, social, shopper, whatever, trade, they all needed specialist skills. But of course, human nature being human nature, we all operate in these individual silos. That's why I call them the Fab Four. And the thing with retail media is it's a combination of everything. It's brand marketing, it's digital marketing, it's shopper marketing, and so on. And so how do you start operating with each other? And that kind of involves new ways of working and new ways of thinking. And that is a real challenge. I've been in rooms in Australia, I've been in rooms in Italy, France, Germany, UK, just in the last year, where sometimes actually the people working in shopper and trade hadn't met each other or actually hadn't been to the same office for the previous year. So they don't know each other. They don't know what each other does. And if I'm in brand marketing, I'm kind of like, why would I, grubby my hands messing around with shopper marketing? It's a different team, sometimes reporting to commercial director. So what I'm saying here is these new ways of working are going to have to happen. Now, I've seen them in the US and I've seen them in the UK, where these new ways of setting up new meetings and setups of new ways of communication, they're coming regardless. And in fact, if it's not retail media going to force this, it will be AI forcing it on everybody else, because no one person is going to have the expertise. You're going to have people who are what I call pie-shaped. And I don't mean a pie at an Aussie rules game. I mean a pie as in PI, where you've got multiple different skills under the one heading. So I'm good at lots of things, but I'm really amazing at 2 or 3 things.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Loaded question for us, Voodoo doing what we do. But do you think formats like shoppable content, shoppable ads are going to help stitch some of that back together again? Particularly, we know that some of the retail media guys are doing a really good job with their on-net inventory, but they're running out of on-net inventory and they're looking at how they can monetize off-net and pull things together. Do you think those sorts of formats are going to help?
Well, there's a phrase I heard a big brand use a couple of months ago, which is conversion everywhere. And conversion everywhere means that regardless of the location, I can encourage the customer to sell, to make the sale, if you will. And yet, you talk a lot of the brand marketers, they're like, why would I get involved in conversion and so on? So a much better frame of reference is that through retail media, through digital commerce, through in-store, whatever the case is, I got to deliver conversion everywhere. And the tool that enables that, if you will, is shoppable. Now, shoppable is about making, reducing the distance from the time of seeing the product, reducing the distance from the inspiration to the sale. Now, this is the key. What is shoppable media? It's not media, it's a thing that enables the reduction of that distance from inspiration to sale.
Removes the friction.
Yeah, reduction of friction. And this is why I talk about my new keynote is called The TikTokification of Retail Media. And of course, people think I'm talking about TikTok. I'm not talking about that at all. What I'm actually talking about is the role of a screen that I can look at something, get inspired by it, buy it, and do it on a reduction of friction, and I'm getting what I want. So TikTokification and shoppable media are all in the same genre. It's the same game, if you will. But there's a resistance to that. The big brands have worked it out, which is that there's no real problem with building a brand and making it shoppable. But there's a lot of snobbery associated with that, because if I go and say, hey, my thing is available as well, and you give you for $99 you can have it. It's associated with late night TV shopping and all these other sort of things. But no, the consumer, trained by apps that are short, vertical videos, is training us to think, I like it, I want it, I want to have it, I want to do it now. Hence shoppable media.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, we've got a saying, why wouldn't you want shoppable with that? Because why wouldn't you want to add the opportunity for the consumer to interact with the product, see its availability, see the other colors, even if they don't purchase there in the moment? They're coming down the purchase funnel, like you said, shortening that path to purchase.
One of the things I say in this context, Paul, is that, a lot of us are looking at the world through the rear view mirror. Yeah. And they're not realizing that people are looking at the world on this screen. One of my sort of gags when I'm doing my keynotes is I get up on stage and say, right, okay, and I'll pull out everybody and said, okay, who's willing to tell me that they believe they spend too much time on this screen? And hands go up, and I say, yeah, well, the rest of you are a bunch of liars, because you are all spending too much time on the screen. And so there's this kind of weird dichotomy of, we all know we're spending too much time on the screen. That's where the eyeballs are. And yet we'll go and have a marketing plan and we say, yes, we want broad reach. Let's go and advertise in Australia on Channel 9 in Melbourne, Channel 9 in Sydney, and you're like, what are you talking about? Yeah, we're sort of like this weird dichotomy. So as a result, the shoppable media thing is a subset of that particular discussion. But what I would say to every brand listening to is, why don't you want to make things shoppable? Why do you want to put any friction or speed bumps between your customer looking at something, or potential customer looking at something and whipping out their credit card? But of course, even me using the word credit card is actually incorrect, because I can actually just go open it up and double click on the right hand side and pay with my Apple Pay.
Yep. I think that is, well, of course, I'm biased, but you and I are very much aligned in that same thinking for quite some time. The discussion here at Vuru was, you have these large platforms that are driving user behavior across a generation, and their expectation of what they can shop has changed. And for brands now, they need to understand that the touch point of that brand that's been put in front of a shopper, their natural inclination is, where do I buy it? They might not be saying that. They can still be getting a brand experience, but that shoppable media at the top of it is a layer, like an open door. So why wouldn't you want every one of your doors to be open?
Well, one of the things in this discussion across the globe around shoppable media is this idea of, like, Gen Z are looking at the world differently. Let's go and do that. I'm like, that's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. You talk to my 88-year-old mother and say, Mom, if you see something and you want to buy it, do you want to wait 2 weeks, or do you want to get it on the spot? What do you think her answer is going to be? So what I want to say to a lot of brands is, why do you not want to take an immediate check? Why do you not want to take an immediate payment? What's the downside? Now, a lot of monopolies, my vitriol is reserved for energy companies and gas companies and all these other things who really make life difficult in terms of taking your money. But you, as particularly a FMCG brand, or maybe a startup brand, you got to make life really super smooth and be willing to take money, rather than, your beautiful assistant is ready and waiting for your call, and an hour and a half later you eventually get somebody and then they say, no, I don't want to take your payment. Yeah, like that's the end of the two ends of the spectrum. You're at this end of the spectrum where there is no gap between inspiration and check written.
So just following on that, I mean, we talked about it before in relation to specifics of being inside retail media. The creative process then with shoppable media, do you see that as it is different, or do you see that it is that layer that you can put on top of an existing brand ad, or do you see people needing to innovate in this space and, like you say, ask for the money?
Well, no, it needs complete innovation. So, and again, it's back to the Fab Four. Again, not a critique, but who has the assets that are put into digital channels or the shopper channels? So typically it's a brand team or an agency team. And in general, they don't really understand, or they don't have the assets that work in shopper, in store, and they don't have the assets that work in digital, and they don't have the assets that work in retail media, particularly because they don't understand retail media, which is obviously incredible news for me because they keep bringing me in to do lots of workshops. So long may that continue, but they're not going to get the assets because they don't understand shoppable media. They don't understand copy and visuals that work in shoppable media. So how are you going to get it? It requires the leap of faith like I had to have, say, 10, 12 years ago when I was working as a CMO of an airline. And we were like, let's try this social media advertising thing. This organic social media doesn't work. Give it a whirl. And I'm sitting in front of the laptop with my marketing team and assistant. And we're like, hey, what are we putting this ad? Oh, let's just take our print ad and make it work. So let he's without sin cast the first stone.
Give it a whirl.
Yeah. And guess exactly what I did. And I was like, bish, bash, bosh, job done. Down the pub. Yeah. And it took a while, and it took a number of years, not just, for me, but like a lot of people to kind of work out that it's its own new language. And that's how the growth of all the direct-to-consumer firms happened, just using social media advertising as a way to grow a startup and scale their businesses. We're in the same zone.
Yeah.
We haven't got a bunch of fresh thinking as yet around it because the big brands are the ones who are the investors in retail media. And they're kind of throwing stuff over the fence. Again, not a criticism. It just takes a while for these things to flow through.
Yeah. If we're talking about innovation and coming back to making things shoppable and just taking the check, but this idea around creativity and in a TikTokification that you've talked of, what's your opinion around, well, if that's really where we want to see more creativity, do you think there is enough options available for these retail media marketers? Is there enough in the market for allow them to be creative and to meet the consumer with what their expectation is around how to engage with content? Is it there, or do you still think it's open and ripe for innovation?
It's ripe for innovation just for one very simple reason, which is that as a marketer, you're trained, or you should be trained to write a brief. And your brief should actually be able to say, here's what this thing's supposed to do, who the target market is, and what have you. But we don't. And, again, I'm a big sinner in this department. I'm like, do stuff. Yeah. And, what we really mean is, create a brief, think through the thing, which therefore creates a capability in terms of creative. But again, how do you explain shoppable media to an ad agency?
Yeah.
Because it's not their thing. So the language and kind of stuff isn't really there. So it's ripe for innovation. And that innovation piece is going to be artificial intelligence. As in, I don't mean, ChatGPT. I mean the application of large-scale, large language models who can understand a brief, who can understand the context, who can understand the channel, and ultimately, hopefully, understand the creative and copywriting required to make all that work. But we're a bit away from that as yet. But there's a series of innovation coming down the track. I actually wrote about it on social media very recently, and a ton of people said, hey, look at my stuff. I'm doing this stuff already. So that's going to be one, the sort of scaling of creative match to shoppable. If you think about it, shoppable media is like a channel. It's a bit of a crude analogy, but it's like a channel here, which is slightly different to a channel that goes and appears on YouTube and a channel that goes and appears on Face and on Meta. That's not quite true in reality. But in terms of couching it as a brief, it's kind of the way you've got to do it. You got to go, I need an ad created for YouTube. The ad has to have all these attributes to build the brand, but it's also got to be shoppable. Okay, when you're writing that brief, what does shoppable mean? Does it say, like I do in my own airline days, does it say book now? Does it say shop now? Does it have a button on the bottom right? Does the person say that? What color is the button going to be? Where would that button link to? Is it going to go to a landing page? Is it going to go to another app? All these thought processes have to be thought through, as I know from my e-commerce days, and it ain't easy.
Yeah. Or is it going to open up an experience on the spot?
Yeah. And by the way, if you've been the marketing person like I have, it's like you sit there and you go, yeah, I got this great idea to do some shoppable media. And I'm, delighted with myself, and I got the team lined up, and it goes to a crappy landing page, or the product's not available.
Yeah.
That's right. They almost add friction because they want to add in the brand experience instead of thinking about what shoppable media is all about. And that's what you said before, is removing the friction, taking the check. But they want to put that brand piece in the middle, so there's that landing page that adds further friction, which you don't see in social media.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking about landing pages, and I'm kind of like lying to myself, if you will, because when I think of landing pages, I'm thinking of something on a browser, sitting in front of my laptop and doing stuff. But, that's not the real world. The real world is I'm scrolling and shopping, and I'm, moving my thumb up and down.
Yeah.
And so scrolling, shopping everywhere, it's like, what role is a landing page?
That's right. I mean, it's interesting you said when you were saying you were planning these campaigns and you were sitting around a laptop. I mean, that's part of the problem right there, isn't it? Is that, most of the time we're in corporate world, we're doing presentations on laptops and reviewing creative on laptops when it's that device, that powerful device you got in your pocket that everybody is using. So
I used to fancy myself as being an expert in email marketing, and I'd be like, and I did lots of email marketing lectures. So then one of the team said to me, Ben said to me, he said, Colin, I've been reading this book, and it's about how to do A/B testing and testing of your stuff without any real cost. And I was like, Ben, no, I'm expert in this topic. I don't need your crappy advice, blah, blah, blah. But the book he referred to was written by a guy who I really admired, Jakob Nielsen. And he's written the best books on user experience ever. And so he says, well, what you do is you get somebody from the accounting team who has no experience whatsoever in your website that you love, and we'll put the email in front of her. So I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, well, my ideas are great and your ideas suck, yeah. And so we put the email in front of the person. It was a kind of a sale on now type email, big kind of card visual in the middle, and the woman looked at the thing and didn't click on the card and didn't click on anything. And part of the process for this particular process, with Jakob Nielsen says, is you don't say anything, you just ask the question. You say, Paul, why did you do that? And you don't go say, oh, you're an idiot. No, you go and say, well, and they say this. And then you realize she basically said to me, she said, well, I don't have any permission to click on anything. And I just see a thing that says click up here. So that's why I clicked on that. So we changed every single thing that we did.
I mean, you're going to make our CFO so happy.
I was going to say the same thing, Nick. Yeah.
She's going to feel great after this, because she's always, that's what I was smiling about. She's just, shout out to Charlotte. She is going to love that, Colin.
It's the accounting and finance team that provides some of the best insights in user experience, actually. So, yeah.
It's true. It's nothing to do with them being an accountant. It's just they're not sitting like we are,
immersed in,
late at night, early in the morning, doing podcasts on shoppable media.
That's right.
It's like we're nerds, and they're like not lying awake. And I think about them. They're amongst our best people do it. So it's cool. Actually, the book where I learned this idea from is called Rocket Surgery Made Easy. And Steve Krug wrote it, and it's really amazing. And he tells you all this thing, and you read it and you go,
yeah,
duh, like Homer Simpson slapping the forehead. So Rocket Surgery Made Easy by Steve Krug. Cannot recommend it highly enough.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Okay, quick fire questions. We're coming to the end here. We love asking these questions. They're a bit inane sometimes, but I think they get a great kind of response. So we're going to jump into it. I know your responses, Colin, are going to be interesting. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I've no idea what the questions are going to be, so I'm ready.
Good. What's the last thing you bought online?
I bought a Martini t-shirt racing top, so I could wear it at my TikTokification of retail media keynote for the first time. As everybody knows, I am ready to bore the arse off everybody talking about motorsport, because I race cars, I love cars, and I'm a car nut. So I spent €120 on this top to basically brand advertise Martini on stage.
I think that's money well spent. What podcast are you currently listening to?
I am listening to a podcast by a guy called David Deutsch. And he's written a book called The Fabric of Reality and the Beginnings of Infinity. Wow. And he has a particular way of thinking around information and knowledge that has kind of changed my perspective on the world. And he says, all problems are just a lack of knowledge problem. And he refers to things like whether it's like nuclear power or whatever the case is, some very big picture stuff. It's not like, he's talking about, buying tops to go and wear on keynotes. So he's basically saying that everything you have is a knowledge problem, and things aren't solved because you have a knowledge gap, and all problems will be solved by more knowledge. And then in turn, that creates its own problems, which also require more knowledge, which is why it really struck me for retail media, because what I'm kind of thinking in general, the world we're entering in requires knowledge, and we don't have enough knowledge to go and get our heads around it. And we look at the world through the rear view lens.
Great take on that. We might be able to guess the answer to this. Could be a few things, but what's your go-to online shop? Is it a motorsport shop? Is it a...
Well, I'm going to give away my worst secrets here, but people go on about social media and how bad it is and stuff like that. My social media is fantastic because it's basically, I look at Facebook and it's essentially 80% cars, motorsport shops, and 20% people I know around the world saying where they are on holiday. So I love social media. I go anywhere. I'm not, to be honest with you, my favorite e-commerce store is an airline one because I spend a lot of time on flights.
Your TikTok's a big space, and obviously with your keynote at the moment, are you more of a watcher or are you actively posting?
Well, this is going to sound completely hypocritical. I try to reduce my usage of social media because I can see how it can kind of distract me from what I'm trying to do. If you want to do a lot of writing and a lot of thinking, spending time on social media, other than to go and look at car stuff, obviously, is a waste of time, which of course is an incredibly useful use of my time. So I try not to use it. And what I try to do all the time is kind of develop what I call, in fact, it's a phrase used by a friend of mine, what skill base do I have? The only skill base I have is pattern recognition. And so what I'm trying to do when I look at stuff like that is look at patterns and recognize them. So no, the world is not ready for me doing TikTok dance videos or eye makeup videos. That's not going to happen. But it's observing the patterns from that is what I'm doing, and hence the TikTokification idea.
Maybe that's something for Kane next year with some dancing.
I feel like a TikTok video with you and Kiri doing a TikTok video.
Kiri, my nemesis, who's like tore me apart on stage. I can't believe it. That'd be cool. It would be a lot of fun if we did that. I'm obviously, as your listeners, I'm a very, very serious person, so I'll be up for that.
A quick a question that might be just too niche: 996 or a 997?
Oh no, so. There's an excellent question. I think from a price perception, I'm going to go for a 996 because that's probably more my affordable range. The 997s are a little more into the 50 to 70 grand. Probably not me, but then the IMS bearing issue has been solved for the 997, so we're in good shape. And I bet you none of my listeners and your listeners understand a word of what I'm saying. And also for just to really annoy them, I've seen a 996 for 18 grand and refused to buy it because I'm a total idiot.
And for our listeners, that's a very specific Porsche nut nerd questions, and you answered it brilliantly. Last one. What's your most memorable, and I'm sure there's going to be a few of them, it doesn't matter in the medium, but what's your most memorable ad campaign?
I've done a good few of them. So I ran a brand in the UK, France, Ireland, and Switzerland, where we were spending 25 million a year on TV advertising. And it involved two guys running around the streets with a telephone number on the front. It was a direct inquiries brand. And the campaign one of the campaigns was particularly memorable, mainly because we shot it during the London riots in 2011, and we spent 5 days shooting in Enfield whilst the riots were going on. So that was a very memorable moment, I can tell you that. So that was probably my most memorable one. I also launched an airline, a new fleet of airline thing, and I managed to hijack the aircraft, the brand new aircraft coming in from Toulouse, and get them to fly around 2 different countries with me in it as one of the 4 passengers, coming off, doing a lot of press, pressing the flesh, kissing the babies, and then fly off again. So that was a very memorable campaign as well. Not something one gets to do that often.
Yeah, they're both fantastic, and you're involved in both of them.
Yeah, well, I was a driver of both of them. I came up with the idea for both of them.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Colin, thank you so much for joining us. It's, you certainly didn't, we said it was going to be a big episode and you certainly didn't disappoint. So there's some great nuggets in there, some great advice for retail media networks. I love what you said about, why wouldn't you want to have shoppable there? Why wouldn't you want to take the money? But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks very much for your time. And I really like nerdy questions. I wish more people would ask me these nerdy questions.
We're going to ask those nerdy questions at Cannes, Colin, and they're going to be super nerdy. You're going to go, yeah, that's those commerce media guys again.
You now know that there is no nerdy car question that I cannot answer.
Oh, that's a challenge. I thought I might just drop that in on the fly when you said you saw the helmet. So,
Well, Nick, I'm the son of a mechanic, and I spent my early years getting, with a fellow grease monkey working in cars. And he then, as a result, I read every single car magazine as a kid. So there's nothing I don't know.
My father was a car journalist for a magazine called Wheels for a little bit. And then he went into advertising. So, yeah.
So we've lost all our audience right away.
We have. We'll move on.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Commerce Media Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're always on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of commerce media, ready to share the newest trends, insightful perspectives, and expert opinions with you. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making media that matters. This podcast is executively produced and edited by Priya Tahazadeh, with co-producers Sandy Ho, Meg Lirish, and me, Rachel Fang. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Bidjigal, Gadigal, and Wurundjeri people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land.